Welcome everyone. Welcome to the first session on our database testing tutorial series. What we're going to do to start off is give you a quick overview about what databases are and how we can work with creating a simple Microsoft Access database. We will compare the database concept with the simpler Microsoft Excel and see what the differences are. Then we'll get deeper into understanding some of the specific features of different databases. But before we get into the theory aspect of understanding the definitions, I want to give you a quick scenario and using which we should be able to learn and master databases, the concept of what and how databases work very easily. Once we finish with databases, then we will go about understanding how can we use SQL as a structured query language to be able to interact with these databases. All right. And finally, we will get into the testing portion of databases. But for this session and coming few sessions, we'll focus on understanding the first block of databases and how they work. Okay. So here is a given scenario that I would like to take as a background to start to explain what databases are. Let's say that there is a job portal website. Let's say like Monster or Career Builder or dice.com. Now as part of this job posting website, you would notice there are different activities that happen on it. There are different types of users that log into it. And there's different types of information and data that is getting exchanged, right? So I could be representing an employer, okay? As an employer, what I would do is I would come in and post and create different jobs here. So every employer like E1, E2, E3 and so on is coming in and creating different jobs like job 1, job 2, job 3 and so on. All right. I could be a candidate who is logging in and seeing which jobs match their specific skills or requirements. And what I could be doing is I could be applying for jobs. And there may be many candidates who are coming to this website and they may be doing different applications on the websites. So if you look at all of these basic components, very, very ground level base components for this kind of an application, you see there is a list for employers, there is a list of candidates, there are a list of jobs, and there's a list of applications. Correct? Now, what is this set of information? This is the set of information that is needed for this application to work overall, right? So unless there is a specific structure and a specific format to this type of information, it will be very tough for this application to work smoothly. Correct? And that is why you need to be able to handle the different types of information or data in a very, very organized fashion. Databases will help you to organize your data in a very, very neat manner. Okay, that is the first thing that it will do. It will organize your data in a very, very structured format, and then you can look at something called as accessing your data and then being able to relate your data with other informations and so on. Now, let's go about creating something very simple based on what we just saw as 4 different components: an employer, a job, an application, and a candidate. Okay. So if each employer comes in, what kind of information do I need for an employer? Okay. So let me erase this drawing and put some information for an employer. Font. I'm going to increase the font so that it's easy for you to read when you watch this video. Okay. Employer. What will an employer need? Employer will need, let's say, a name, company, and let's say email. Okay. A candidate will need a name, let's say the candidate will also need a skill and an email, and let's say also a phone number. A job will require a location, a skill that is required, and a rate for that job that they're willing to pay, or the salary or rate. Okay, so I'll put it as rate because we can say this is dollars per hour, for example. All right, and then we have, what was the fourth thing? Applications. So who is applying for what? So there is a candidate name, there is a employee name, right? There is a job name. Okay. Now what we have done here is we've represented how the different types of data is going to be there, the different fields or columns or information that is required for each thing. Now let me save this as something we could put into our folder. Database testing practice, and here I'm going to say job portal sample data format. All right. Now, how can I store different types of data? All right. Let's say I have the following information. So for an employer, I might have one record as, let's say, Facebook is the company, and let's say there's a guy called or a lady called Carol who is representing Facebook, and the email ID is c@fb.com. Similarly, there is someone else called Steve, let's say from Apple, and they have an email ID called s@app.com. And three, let's say there is me, Karthik, at let's say ITElearn, and that's a k@it.com. Now, these are records for the employer. Each row that you see here is a set of data that we are trying to put into the employer data. A collection of such set of information is basically your raw data or your database itself. The format in which you put this data becomes very critical, and that is the reason you will see, instead of me putting this in a very simple text format in a notepad, I could do something a little bit more better for me to handle and so on. What is the challenge in this type of a text format? The format is tough. Number two is I cannot easily say which is what. Let's say there is more than one employer from Apple. Okay. So I'll say there is also a Bob at Apple, and the email ID is b@app.com. So in this case, what is happening is, for a set of 4 records, just 4 records, this is fine, right? It is easy for us to organize and so on. But imagine what happens when there are 40 sets of such records. What happens if there are 400 sets of data, or 4,000, or even 4 million sets of data? Then what would happen? And if you're aware, Facebook probably by now has close to 1 billion or even crossed 1 billion Facebook accounts. 1 billion sets of data, and each having relationships with the other users, their friend list, their likes, and so many other features, correct? The more you increase the number of records, or even if you go on increasing the amount of information, let's say we want to add a phone number, we want to add all the recent jobs, we want to add the location into an employer records, it becomes very complex to maintain. Number one, what is maintain? Adding new records, modifying existing records, updating or deleting them, and so on. That's maintenance. Or even searching for records. For example, we want to find out all the people who are from Apple and who are applying, not applying, who are posting different jobs. Then you have to go through each record, do a comparison and so on. And it becomes very tough way to maintain heavy sets of data. all right? And then efficiency goes down in terms of how quickly you're able to search through data and so on. That is the reason it is not a great format to store data in form of a notepad. If I want to write simple set of information or type a letter or just a paragraph or something, then it is fine. But to store data itself, it becomes a challenge to do it with a notepad. And that's why you could go to a next level and talk about a Microsoft Excel worksheet. All right, sample Excel data. This is the name I give to my Microsoft Excel. Now, what is a Microsoft Excel document? How is it stored? I know most of you are familiar with it, but the basics are very, very critical because these are stepping stones for you to master databases and then SQL and then testing portion of database testing. Okay. Excel is nothing but a tabular representation of data. You have rows in an Excel and you have columns in an Excel, right? So you could sort and store data in a more organized manner. You can also do easier search for data and maintain it more easily. Then why a database is needed if I have an Excel? We will come to that. But let's look at what are the components into a Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel has something called as workbook. Every Excel file, for example, sample Excel data.xls or xlsx, is a Microsoft Excel workbook. It is called as a workbook. Workbook is nothing but a collection of one or more worksheets. Okay, so the sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 are your Microsoft Excel sheets. So Microsoft Workbook has Microsoft Excel sheets, and each sheet is representing one table. So in our case, if I have 4 sets of such information like employer, candidate, job and applications, what I could do is I could put one for each. So I'm going to right click on sheet. I'm going to click on rename and call this as, let's say, employer. Then I'm going to right click again, rename, and I'm going to call this as candidate. Sheet 3, rename and call this as jobs. Sheet 4, when you click on it, it will automatically open up a new sheet for us. Right click and say rename this as applications. Now what we are trying to do is move from a very standard deck of data to something more organized. In this case, what we will do is we will take the first row and call this first row as a way to store what details we want. So I'm going to call this as the first column as name, then company, and then an email. And now I will start putting this information in there. So if I paste this whole information, it has put one line per row, but it is still not sorted. So I could quickly edit this data to take care of that. Now you can also import data from Notepad into an Excel, but I'm not worried about it right now. Steve Apple s@app.com, Karthik ITE learn k@it.com. See, automatically it is also converting some of the data, each information. This is all pieces of information stored and sorted together, right? This is also at Apple, b@apple.com. Now, if you look at this, straight away you will see that we are able to sort it in a proper information, in the sense that by columns and so on. I am able to see an easier way to enter data, and I can go back and do a lot of formatting and fine tuning and so on. So this is a much better tool than your simple notepad to store data. Now we have created certain amount of data. Now the same data, you could do different things like filter, or you could sort it by the name of the company or by the name itself and so on. All right. So now what you've done is you've created employer. Similarly, let's go and create something for candidate. What is there for candidate? A name, skill, email, phone. Now, each thing that we do here, email, phone. All right. Now, each set of information or every minute that we're spending here by creating this data is something which is going to help us for the next set of sessions. So name, let's say I'll call this as Raghu. Another girl, let's say Seema. And then let's say there is George, who is also a candidate. And let's say there is Lee. Okay. Now each of them can put a skill, what skill they have. Let's say Raghu is a web developer. Let's say Seema is a QA engineer. Let's say George is a DBA. Lee is, let's say, a app iOS developer. All right. Each of them have their own emails at hunter.com, Seema at hunter.com, like gmail.com, some email, okay, show at gmail.com, Lee at yahoo.com. These are their emails. Now, let me put some numbers for them. 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Okay. Now what we've done is we've created a candidate sheet. So the way we have put our data in here is to store records. The first thing that we're trying to do is store information. But the challenge in this type of information is basically 2 or 3 things. Number one, if I have thousands of records, in this case I just have 4 records, but I have thousands or tens of thousands of records, it becomes very slow. It becomes very tough for us to search or access data. It will become tougher for us to maintain data and so on. And hence, it is important for us to have a better solution than Microsoft Excel. Excel is a great, fantastic tool for smaller records, for smaller sets of data, which are in hundreds or thousands at the max. But once it crosses that, it becomes very tough for us to manage. Why should we have a better solution? Why is it needed? The reason we need a better solution is this. Let me, is this put here? Yes. Open a quick notepad and show you. What happens with the database is this thing. Okay. We have users who are coming into an application and they are trying to perform specific actions or activities on it, right? There are different types of users that are coming in and so on. What is happening with the application when these users are coming in? They are logging in. So when they have to log in, what has to happen to, for example, right? Or even let's talk about when an employer comes in and logs in, they have to log in. So every time the system has to authenticate how is that process happening. To do that, this app UI or user interface is the front end. When the user goes to the browser and opens this application, what they see here is the front end. But the front end is not storing the data. The data is stored at the back end in a different structure altogether, in a series of hard drives, just like our drive and so on. And that information needs to be brought up here and shown. A simplest thing is our Windows Explorer. It has a front end which says what are the different folders and the files in it. You could go change, modify, add, delete, or do whatever with it. But the real data is stored somewhere in your hard drive. What you're seeing is an easier representation for you for the front end. So if an employee needs to log in, she has to enter information that is taken into a database, verified. If the information is correct, it brings up and says that, you know what, okay, all good, show the next set of information. The employer goes in and changes some records, then all good, we have made some entry into it. So each time, for each activity, there are multiple databases that are getting interacted. Okay, and if each activity is taking, let's say, 5 seconds, 5 seconds is good, right? So employer enters the email and password. It takes 5 seconds to come here and search for the right record. Then it takes another 2 seconds, let's say, to display this, right? Now, if this is the efficiency, what happens is it is just not these 5 seconds, but they also want to show how many jobs has this employer recently posted, how many applications have come into this employer, what is this employer's local address, what is the weather looks like today in this employer's city or zip code. So there are different database interactions that are happening for each of this set of information, and a complex series of networking is performed at the back end. And finally, there is a lot of information that is getting displayed. If I have 10 such sets of data and each takes, let's say, about 6 seconds, then we're already talking about 1 minute to log into the application. Now what happens when each process is done? And if that is the type of efficiency, then users will stop using this website and business will go down. And that is why the efficiency is so very important for us to be able to perform. And hence, you cannot have a system for, especially when you have lots of records, to have slow efficiency. And that is why you need to get into a better tool, and for that we use databases. Now, how does a simple database look? For this, I have various databases that we could use. We have databases like MySQL, we have Oracle databases, we have SQL Server, we have MS Access, and so on. For practice and for this session, we will use Microsoft Access. MS Access is a very easy and simple database, and most of you who are watching this session may have access to it. I will also show you how you could install MySQL and start working with it later. Okay, but let's use MS Access as a good database to work with it. So you've seen how we could store information in a notepad and in an Excel. Now, next, let's look at what we could do in a Microsoft Access session. All right, so that's coming in the next chapter, and hopefully this is giving you a good introduction. But now we will see how we take this data and start working with it in our database. One quick note that what you see is more theory in terms of the advantages, the features, and so on. Unless you really get into thousands of records, you really don't see the differences coming in. But I'm showing you how the features will work and how we will take each set of information and build from here on. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now. We'll see you back in session 2. Take care.